Yeah, very warm welcome. This is Andy. It's Two Peas in a Podcast. Today, with a very disturbing story. It's happening to many older people out there. Um, Teresa is come on. She's talking about her mum. But first, let's have a little jingle. Yeah, Teresa's got a shocking story. I've not heard this, and I like it this way because it's organic. Then it comes from the heart rather than preparing things. I think it's better that way. Therese, welcome to the show, and I'm sorry to hear um, at least a very small bit of your story.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having us on and listening to what we've got to say. Do you want me to just start with a brief?
Yeah, do a brief one for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I mean, if just be prepared that I may interrupt and ask a question, but normally, to get the brief story out, I just remain quiet.
Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, so my mum, Joan Stead, was in a care home for a brief respite in November 2021, awaiting a care package simply to get into the shower. Whilst in the care home, she had a minor fall backwards. An ambulance was called and she went through the Hull Royal Infirmary A&E department. She was x-rayed, no fractures found. She was medically fit for discharge, but because she was awaiting a care package, they sent her to a medically fit for discharge ward at the other hospital in the area, which is the Castle Hill Hospital. She was there for a couple of days. Everything was fine. She was laughing, joking, drinking a coffee, chatting to her family on a mobile phone, which was very important to her. I was one of the designated visitors due to the back end of COVID. It was December 2021. And on the Tuesday, I visited her, and Tuesday the 23rd of November, she was absolutely fine. I rang her on the evening and said goodnight, and there was an air of complacency on that ward because it was a medically fit for discharge ward. In my opinion, fact, but I'll say my opinion because obviously people do things. The nurses were lazy and complacent, and there was an international nurse employed on the ward without full training. It's not her fault. She wasn't trained properly. She was simply dropped on the ward. And she was the nurse designated to get my mother into bed that night to use a standing aid called the SARA study. Now, the SARA study comes with obviously rules and regulations. And one of those is that it must be braked and the patient gets up themselves onto the SARA study. But the international nurse came at my mother from behind. The SARA study wasn't braked, so my mother went rolling through with it across the ward floor and landed on her chest on top of it. And there's a big bar on the SARA study, and my mother landed on the bar on her chest, and it caused a blunt force trauma fracture to the sternum. Now, within 20 minutes of this happening, my mother texted me and said, "Help me, I've been dropped." So I texted my mother back and said, "What's happened?" And then eventually I rang the ward and I said, "What's going on?" I was on the telephone for 29 minutes and 7 seconds. Some nurses dispute this. They say they don't remember me ringing. Whereby one of the nurses admitted she'd dropped my mother had been dropped onto the ward floor on top of this piece of equipment. I could hear my mother crying in the background. They assured me my mother was fine. So obviously being medics, you believe what they say. So I texted my mother and I said, "Mum, you're fine. The nurses say there are no fractures. You're absolutely fine." I could still hear my mother crying in the background. Anyway, they took my mother off the ward that night because she was making so much noise crying. and they put her in a side ward. So I rang the next morning at 7 o'clock to ask how she was, and they said, oh, she'd been taken off the ward for making so much noise. And then obviously I went in the next day, and my mother was just not herself. She couldn't breathe properly. She wasn't speaking properly. She wasn't interacting. She had a big lump on her chest. So this went on for the next few days, whereby they gave her no care, no painkillers, no imaging, no doctor care, nothing, absolutely nothing. She'd stopped eating, she'd stopped drinking. And I was questioning, my mother says she's got a fracture. My mother said she felt a chest fracture. What are you going to do about it? Absolutely nothing. The next day, one of the nurses, obviously I can't say names, wrote a discharge letter for my mother saying she was medically fit to go home, trying to get rid of her. Obviously, we couldn't take her because she was awaiting a care package. And we were saying, she's still poorly. Anyway, this went on for a few days and she became more poorly and more poorly. She wasn't eating. A member of the catering staff pulled me aside on one of the visits and said, do something about your mother. She's not eating, she's not drinking, get a doctor now. And I said, I've been trying, but they're ignoring me. That, they weren't answering the phone to me, they wouldn't speak to me. Eventually a doctor came along, and he saw how poorly my mother was getting because she was getting acquired hospital pneumonia, obviously from the fracture. And this particular doctor ordered a CT scan without telling us, and it proved that my mother had a sternum fracture. So she'd gone from the 23rd until the 30th of November, what the family called the no care period. Nothing happened, no help, no painkillers, no imaging, no oxygen.
No, there was oxygen. They did it.
Oh, we did get a little bit of oxygen. There was no care. No, she wasn't eating, she wasn't drinking. There was no interaction between the nurses and us. They were simply blanking us. So when they found out that she had a fracture, obviously she was put on strong painkillers, antibiotics, and the pneumonia began to clear. She began to get better. They apologised for, this particular doctor apologised for not scanning her earlier. And then another doctor came along who had written in the notes, no fall this admission, then he said exactly the opposite in words. And he prescribed my mother, which was inappropriate at the time, a long-term bone health drug, which was to be administered via infusion, which we thought was inappropriate at the time. But he insisted on it, and we thought at the time, oh, well, it's trying to help. And he dithered in the notes about the dose. He was going from 7 to 5 to 4 milligram. And then what happened was 2 doses were ordered because of his incompetence. 2 doses were delivered to the ward, and it's called zoledronic acid, and it carries a government health warning. And there are mandatory tests that you're supposed to do before this drug is administered. And those mandatory tests weren't carried out. They used old blood tests for the values that did not stand on that day. So therefore, they'd messed up at that point. 2 doses were delivered to the ward in my mother's name, and on the balance of probability, nobody can tell us where the second dose went. On the balance of probability and what happened thereafter with my mother's body, 2 doses were infused into my mother, thereby giving her an overdose of the zoledronic acid. And hours after the infusion, a condition dropped suddenly and significantly, and within 2 days she was declared palliative, and 5 days after the infusion she died. Now, there's a lot that goes on between this regarding testing and not testing, and the pharmacy and the drug allocation and its delivery to the ward. But the family can prove that 2 doses went to the ward in my mother's name. There's no system for a spare dose being accounted for. And given the fact that within hours after the infusion, my mother was screaming in agony, obviously with her, you know, it killed her kidneys off. And she went into type 2 respiratory failure from the kidney function. And she died a few days later. Now, there was a antidote they could have given, knowing full well they'd overdosed her. And that was calcium glutamate, and they failed to do that. It was just one big cover up after cover up after cover up, and the lengths these nurses went, the particular nurses, I'm not saying everybody, just the ones that were involved, the lengths they went to cover this up are shocking and criminal. And we eventually lost her a few days later, and it's been
Well,
one big fight after.
At this point, we'll do it in stages, then we'll get on to cover-ups and post-mortems. But at this stage, I mean, it does actually sound like, I don't know. Yeah, it had to be that drug that probably killed her, but that shocked me a little bit. What shocked me even more, the 10 days of not giving her any care at all after what had happened. I mean,
it was 5 days of no care, and what happened?
Oh, sorry,
was,
5 days. You know what I mean? I mean, why are you screaming on the ward, missus? You know, it's not because she's had something nice to eat or she's not got a TV on that she wanted. It's because she's in severe pain. You don't move somebody off a ward because you're in severe pain. You actually look after them, don't you? Even in the worst care setting, that is a basic. You know, that is like giving water to a dog when he's had no water. It's the basics.
Well, like I've said in my complaints, and there's been a lot over that. It's coming up to 4 years now since she passed away. People who treat animals negligently end up in prison. These people are still working on the wards. These people are still walking free, and these people are free to do it to anybody else's mother, father, anybody who's vulnerable, who simply cannot speak up for themselves and know that something has gone wrong. And it is shocking, and it's the cover-up culture that killed our mother. And what started as a cover-up has now become a scandal, because they've got so deep into the lies, and I'll say allegedly because these people come after you. They're so deeply embedded in the lies that there is no way out for them. They've got to continue. They have to continue the lie, and that is what's happening now. And they have employed every lawyer, solicitor, barrister to negate what happened to our mother. And that alone, to me,
So is it
says a lot.
I think you said Cottenham Hospital, is it the Hull NHS Trust that's the problem here?
Yeah, it's the Huth Trust, yeah. I mean, when my mother was dropped, sorry about that. When my mother was dropped, the trust was already under a CQC instruction for falls in the elderly, which is probably one of the reasons they didn't want to log the fact that my mother had been dropped, because the CQC were already on their backs. And obviously, they don't want any more falls against their name. And, sorry.
Just to let you know, when I was younger, me and the wife, we had 2 kids. We actually lived in, I've forgotten the name of the area now. Anyway, it's Greatfield, that's it. We lived in Greatfield in Hull. So,
yeah.
And we went to the Greatfield surgery. A boy had a problem. I don't know what it was now, but some kind of meningitis, actually. He had meningitis symptoms. Now, they left him saying nothing wrong, parents are panicking. 24 hours later, it was rushed to hospital. I mean, luckily that the hospital doctors said, that they neglected your son and they sorted it out and he didn't die. He's still alive today. But it just shows you that you get some bad and some good, but
Yeah.
it's scary though. I mean,
Well,
scary what's
we're
going
not
on.
saying everybody's bad. We're not saying that every elderly person goes into hospital and doesn't come out, but there are an awful lot of people that are failed by the NHS. It's not just our trust; it's happening up and down the country, everywhere. And I really believe also that in some cases, some families don't even realise that their elderly relative has lost their lives unnecessarily. We're a pretty switched on family. We know exactly what's happened. We understand all the science behind it. We understand the process. We've been able to call them out. And believe you me when I say the whole trust fear this family, they fear us, and they fear us for the knowledge and the
I
evidence that
was
we've
going to
got.
say they're not afraid of what they've done wrong and getting into
No.
trouble. They're afraid that you'll find out yourselves, because once you know what they've done wrong, that they've got no leg to stand on. They can have the best barrister in the world,
Oh yeah.
and nothing. They can't get away with that basically.
They
And
fear
and
our
and you are
knowledge.
right. Whole NHS trust isn't the worst ones going. I mean, they've made a few mistakes recently. I've looked online, and yeah, they're just sort of average people. But when it comes to what they've actually done, in your case, is that one too much, really?
Well, nobody goes into hospital and is declared medically fit for discharge with no fractures and expects not to come out, and neither did the family. But it's the way that they've covered it up, and what became the hospital cover-up quickly became a cross-organisational collusion with the other organisations involved, and that is the ICB, the police, and unfortunately, we're now finding that the coronial system is involved.
Now,
And
give us
they're
some
all
examples
protecting
of
each other.
the cover-up.
Yep, absolutely. No one, and I also think there's a little bit in our case of they don't like being called out by a competent family. They don't like the fact that we know what happened. They don't like the fact that we understand, all the blood tests, the imaging, everything. They don't like the fact we understand the process. We've called them out on so many policies that we've had them taffled up in meetings where they're just sat looking at each other, and it's embarrassing for them. We did reach as far as the Chief Nursing Officer of England, Dame Ruth May. We got a meeting with her in London, and we had one in Doncaster with her. And she believed all of our evidence. She believed our mother died, and she actually commissioned 2 new investigations to be held. Unfortunately, she then went on to immediately retire, and those 2 investigations have never evolved. We've still got outstanding 2 serious incident investigations, another one into the death of my mother, and another one into the behaviours and the integrity of the staff who carried out the original investigation from the ICB in York. And they've just sat dormant. They're just refusing to do them. So, they go through phases. They start off nice, then they turn nasty, then they ignore. And obviously, we're now at the ignore phase where, it's simply, well, who are you? They think they're not answerable to anybody. So yeah, we've got to the top Chief Nursing Officer of England, and unfortunately, her successor, Duncan Burton, I can name him because that is a fact. He is the Chief Nursing Officer of England. Has refused to interact with the family, and he said it's nothing to do with him. While he sits in his office and writes silly little posters on what 200-300 grand a year. We really have met the worst of the worst in these people. Apart from, like I said, Dame Ruth May was excellent. She called out the first investigation that was done by the ICB, said it had no integrity, and she was concerned about their behaviours. We've met police officers who had carried out the investigation into my mother's unlawful death, who have said they believe all the evidence and it's spot on, but there's nothing they can do about it. So we've met individuals on a personal level that agree with us, but just are not prepared to stick their heads on the line or do anything about it, which then becomes cross-organisational collusion, and that's what we're experiencing now. And it's shocking, and it, something has got to be done. West Streeting needs to be answering to the family. Meet us, tell us why this happened. Says nobody's ever said sorry. Nobody's ever said sorry. And we've not gone on it for money. We've let the 3-year period elapse. We've not put a claim in. It's not about money for the family. It's about accountability, justice, and learning going forward. And these people do not want to learn from their mistakes. They're not bothered about learning. They don't care about the next person that comes onto the ward and is failed. All they're bothered about is their reputation and stats and that sort of thing. They're not bothered about learning going forward. We offered ourselves up for learning. We'll come in and talk to nurses about, what happened with our mother and not being trained properly and speaking up for yourselves. They're not interested and they're not bothered. And as I said, the family, people say, oh, what is it, you're after money? No, we're not after money. We've not gone down that route at all. It's about an apology, admitting what you did, justice, and learning going forward.
Yeah, I can't believe that they do that. So where's the police sort of covered this up and then explain about the the post-mortem, the inquest? Why has that been dragging on for 4 years?
The doctor that ordered the CT scan after she passed away, he said he was going to pass it to the coroner for investigation, and the coroner passed it to Humberside Police for a criminal investigation. Unfortunately, we never got the criminal investigation, and I'm going to say I'm alleging now because obviously we don't trust anybody not to come after us. So I allege, although I know it's true because I've experienced it and it's happened, Humberside Police never investigated the death properly. They never crammed it. There was never a crime number. It's not been crammed to Home Office procedures. We were simply led up the garden path by the SIO in the case, who, made the right noises at the right time. So it's never been investigated. The staff were never interviewed as suspects. They weren't even interviewed as witnesses. We found out at one of the pre-inquest hearings on the 19th of September just gone that the police actually only ever gave the staff a Q&A answer question sheet. So it's like, what's your name? Where did, so we found out we've been lied to again. In fact, the SIO, Senior Investigating Officer, we had a meeting with him, I think it was in January 2024. And he sat, my mother had 2 postmortems because we called out the first one and another postmortem was done, second one. And he sat on a desk opposite me and he looked me in the eye and he said, your mother's been through 2 local chop shops, which I thought was absolutely disgusting. For a serving police officer to say that to the bereaved family, 2 local chop shops, and to this day, after obviously lodging a complaint, there's been no apology to the family. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it continued and the case was closed in December 2024, which aligned to the day with the day that the serious incident investigation was closed down by the ICB, and they all came up with the same result, suspiciously. There was cross collusion between the ICB and the police all the way through the investigation, which there shouldn't have been. They've shared information. They've shared my evidence with each other. It's been an absolute sham. and we've currently got numerous complaints lodged with Humberside Police. Obviously, they're just sitting on them, and you get a letter every so often. They sit on it, and they sit on it, and they sit on it. Because the police themselves, there is no regulation. The hospital police themselves, the ICB police themselves, and the police themselves. There is no regulatory body that actually comes down on these people and helps victims such as my mother and the bereaved family that's left behind. We've been made out to be the criminals in all of this, not the other way around. So it's ongoing. We've still got the inquest to come, and it'll be 4 years after the death when the inquest comes. And that's very, very rare, when they're saying that there was no shenanigans that went on, nothing untoward happened. For an old lady still not to have an inquest 4 years after the death with no death certificate. Obviously, you get an interim death certificate so that you can sort the finances out. But there's been nothing, you know, we've got no death certificate. My mum's not resting in peace, and neither of the family would not grieve properly. It's fight after fight after fight, and it's been full on every single day for the last 3.5 years up to where we are now. We're coming up to 4 years in December, where we've investigated, we've learned every policy, we've written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters, and we're still not at peace with it.
There's no point asking, have you been to the MP? Because that's the
I've
same
been
answer.
there, I've done that.
That's the same answer as the rest.
Been
Yeah,
there and done that. Diana Johnson is our local MP, and she's also the policing minister. And basically, she refused help. She didn't want to get her fingers dirty. She didn't want to stand up and be counted. So, you know, obviously, again, I'll say they're all in it together. After we'd had meeting with some of the NHS services, I got solicitors' letters from their solicitors denying me access to healthcare. On paper, I've had my healthcare removed twice, because I've continued with my complaint against the hospital. So who do you know in the country who gets the healthcare removed for simply standing up and being counted, in the fact that they know how the mother was killed and they're standing by it?
well, do you know what? Of all the
Shocking.
shows I've ever done, there've been people locked up in mental health for complaining about the health treatment. There's been people that have moved abroad or forced to move abroad, but never anybody denied hospital treatment because they've complained.
Yeah.
You're the first.
I can show you the 2 solicitors' letters that I've got. One solicitor is Capsticks in Leeds, and the other one is Brown Jacobson. And they are both representing, Capsticks represent the trust, and Brown Jacobson represent the ICB currently at inquest in the coronial process. And the tricks that they play, and I'm going to say allegedly again, because again, I don't trust these people. You know, we see it every day where people are getting locked up for simply speaking the truth and speaking out. So everything I say is alleged, simply to cover my own back, because, you know, obviously we don't trust the system, and we don't trust the process, and we don't trust the people.
No, absolutely. You have to do that. But do you know what? When we finish this, we'll have a couple of minutes chat. I've got a few ideas, because in previous cases I've helped, it has actually shocked the system and they've got answers, but it's whether you're willing to agree or not. But there's a few people listening, by the way, on YouTube. Aaron's Transport and Travel. It says, sorry to hear that what you're going through, Theresa. That's an awful thing to happen. This is unlawful. And hope you get justice soon. Somebody else said, anonymous, some hospitals just now always moving people due to bed spaces, even if they're severely unwell. It's shocking.
Yeah. I'd like to add, Andy, also, just a matter of interest. My mum was also a retired auxiliary nurse from the same hospital.
Wow.
And she gave her all to that job, her absolute all. And this is how, you know, down the line she was treated. She was treated like a dog. On 3 occasions, I will add, from a human point of view, which has nothing to do with the death, but it just shows how these animals in the hospital that are getting paid to do a job and look after our loved ones, and I call them animals because my mother died like an animal. She was begging to live and she was in agony. On the 3 occasions I went in, after she'd been dropped, she was sat naked and they were all just walking past her. The disrespect to my mother was heartbreaking. Why should anybody have to see their elderly mother sat naked, crying for help with a fractured sternum that they'd caused, and they're walking backwards and forwards past the bed, ignoring her? I'd never seen my mother naked in her life, ever. It absolutely broke my heart to see like that. It was disgraceful. And it's happening it still happens now. I know it does. I know it's happening now. I just don't want anybody else to go through what my mum went through. Nothing will bring her back. You know, at the end we couldn't even speak to her because she was too distressed to speak. She couldn't even get her words out. But she knew that they'd killed her. She left a video saying, she left us a video saying, you know, which nurse came at her. She described her perfectly. And as she was dying, my mum never swore. Am I allowed to swear in context? Andy?
Yes, I just can't believe what I'm hearing. Yeah, carry on.
Am I allowed to use a swear word in context of what my mother said?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because you know everyone swears anyway.
Well, as she was dying, my mum never swore, and you know she wouldn't allow us to swear either. She knew that she'd been dropped, and she didn't know she'd been overdosed, obviously. She knew that a sternum was fractured and she knew they'd caused it and left her without any care. She said, as she was dying, get the police, the bastards have killed me. She knew exactly what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, going back to when she had the accident, or sorry, you know what I mean.
She was dropped.
At least when she was dropped.
Yeah.
Would that alone, because I'm not an expert on this either. I mean, I think the lethal injection killed her, but before that, wouldn't that have gave you chest? Well, it did give her chest problems, didn't it? So why the hell didn't they pick that up in 5 days? It's ridiculous.
They knew what had happened, but you know, she had massive trauma injuries to her chest. And one of my brothers is helping with the investigation, and he's done 3D images of the CT scan, and he's found out that she had a lot of trauma to her a windpipe from it as well. She couldn't breathe properly. She couldn't swallow. She stopped eating. She stopped answering a mobile phone, and my mum loved a little mobile phone, absolutely loved it. She was on it every day to all different members of the family. They knew exactly what had happened, and they knew she was suffering, but they knew it'd gone past the point of being able to turn the clock back and saying, well, this happened, so now we're going to treat her. They'd gone past that point. They'd already said nothing happened, so they had to go with the lie. Allegedly, after that, they had to go with it because they knew that if they then admitted it, there'd be in trouble for not giving her any treatment. And obviously she deteriorated and got worse, and she got hospital-acquired pneumonia. But it was the catering staff that pulled me aside. I knew she was poorly, I knew what had happened, but it was the catering staff who had also observed it on the inside of the hospital and said to me, for goodness sake, do something about your mother and do it now. And she said it through gritted teeth so that nobody heard her on the ward. And I said, I'm trying, but they're just ignoring me. Nobody would speak to me. Nobody would speak to me on the ward. They ignored me. I went and stood at the nurses' station every time I visited to try and discuss it with them, and not one of them looked up from the nurses' station. And we've been brought up to be polite, and I never interrupted. So what I did was I left the ward and thought, well, I'll ring when I get home. They never answered the phone. And if they did answer the phone after 10 minutes, it was, what do you want? Your mother's medically fit for discharge. And put the phone down. The rudeness and the attitude from the nurses was, you wouldn't think they were nurses, employed as nurses. Absolutely not. It was disgraceful.
I think it's very simple. If with many people have different opinions, but I think if one person had been like that and they missed something not fair enough, but you can live with that. But when many people try to cover up something that happened, then you need to fight until you die, because
I will do.
Yeah, it's just,
And until it's had a physical effect on me, it's had a mental effect on me, because I'm the next of kin, and I'm the one that obviously put the complaint into the hospital, because I was the one visiting her at the time, shared with one of my siblings. Due to COVID, only a couple of us was allowed in. So obviously we couldn't all pile in with the complaints. It had to be one designated family member, and it was me. Until I became really unwell with it early this year. It's been done between me and my husband. My husband's spent every waking hour learning the processes and, going to the meetings and everything. And now one of my other siblings is picking up the baton, and he's, and he's taking it on as well. But we've got loads and loads of evidence. We've captured video recordings of the NHS lying, the ICB investigators lying. We've got so much, it's unbelievable. And the hospital are desperate to see our videos, and that's why they've turned nasty. Because we keep saying we'll go public and they'll all be published. And they're terrified, absolutely terrified of our evidence. And they'll do any. What gets me is the lengths they'll go to cover it up. To cover up what happened. They'll employ lawyers and solicitors to attack me rather than just tell the truth.
it's ridiculous. Definitely ridiculous. Can I just give a quick, just because we appreciate listeners, someone called Truth Over Lies, and they're saying it's despicable what's going on, especially, I don't understand this bit, the rollout of the needlecraft. Suppose they mean the injections. And then they go on to say the vanity of evil is such a resounding truth within mankind, and most people don't think they're capable of evil acts, but they've proved they very much were 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. You wouldn't think that the way that I'm not saying all of the nurses, there's only a few involved on the ward. There were some that really didn't want to get involved, but then again, they won't speak up either. So you've got to question, why won't you speak up? Some of the actions of those nurses, to me, are worse than the worst criminal you can see on the street. A lot of the managers that we've met for meetings, they come across as professional, they dress professionally, they drive nice cars, they live in nice houses, but believe you me, I allege the criminals. It is absolutely shocking, and they're simply paid just to cover it up.
Yeah,
And it's happening all the time.
I mean, I'm just thinking now about the Lucy Letby case. I know it's nothing to do with your case or even similar, but it does show that, if one doctor makes a mistake, or even one nurse maybe, why would they go to that length to cover it up? And it just, okay, that's a bit high profile, but there are other cases in mental health where people have committed suicide, and I've even got them escape from the North Yorkshire hospital. You know,
Yeah,
by naming and shaming everybody involved. The lady escaped. She then went on um, to have more problems because they was interrogating her at her house because she was complaining, and then they got her back in hospital, and then she killed herself.
yeah.
But I just don't understand why they go to that length to cover stuff up.
Well, it's for protection of the organisation, and sadly, the organisations protect each other. We found that the police, in our opinion, and I will allege, and I'm very careful about what I say because I don't trust any of them, you know, not to simply come and cart you off. They acted as errand boys for the trust. You know, every time the trust complained about me, the police had come poking the nose in, sending me emails. You've said this to the trust and you've said that. It's back off. It's none of your business. You get on with your job. And let you know, the cross communication and collusion between them all was wrong. It's wrong. It's simply wrong. Your average man does not stand a chance with these people in getting justice or accountability. You know, you just do not stand a chance. But I'm going until I'm no longer here, until I drop down, whether it be tomorrow or in 10 years. I want them to accept what they did. I want an apology.
Can I just, sorry to keep interrupting, can I just
Yeah,
read
no,
this
sorry.
out before I forget?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is from daughter to mum. And I probably won't read it all, but I'll read most of it. It's heart wrenching. Dear Mum, you left before your time. Was fighting to stay, but the choice was taken away from you, and that is hard to accept. I'm so proud of how you fought, but it wasn't a fight you could win, Mum. I made you a promise on that sad day and in the days preceding, and that promise I made to you will be fulfilled. This will keep me going in my darkest hours where I'm longing and desperate to see you, when my phone no longer pings with your regular texts, when I can no longer call you or hear you. The goodnight text saying sleep well, Dee, when I no longer can walk up your path, sorry, and see you through the window, sat there with your bubble hat on. You need to rest now, Mum. You deserve peace, and you'll find that now with Dad. He'll look after you, and now you can resume your trips to the garden centres in the sky with your cappuccinos. I'm truly blessed you're my mum, and the memories of you I shall treasure for the rest of my life. I will hold dear and never forget your love and commitment to our family, but it's your turn now, Mum, to be looked after. So rest in peace and let Dad look after you. I mean that I don't normally get emotional, but you know that got me emotional before the
That's just
show.
how it is, Andy. That's exactly how, and I had to put it in a way that the paper wouldn't accept, you know, that I was actually saying somebody had killed her, and that's the best I could come up with, and every word is true and from the heart. That, you know,
Well, it's time now you get a bit of justice. Let other people come up with ideas, and you take a little bit of a back seat, and we'll get justice for mum one way or the other. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not promising. Things do go wrong. Things do go right. But I always think that if you put pressure on people in a big way, because when you're on your own in a little family or on your own, because some people are on their own, these big people they just rubbish you. But when you're in a group or a big community, they tend to listen a bit more.
well, that's what some of the organisations have said to us. Individual police officers, when they've got us sat in a room with us on their own, they say your evidence is spot on, it's believable, it's true, it adds up. But you're not an organisation, you're just little old you. So nobody's gonna do anything about it. And you're right, we don't have the platform. We know exactly what happened. We're competent. We understand the processes. We understand what happened. We've got the timeline down to the seconds of who was where, who said what, did what, who was involved. But we're not an organisation. We are unrepresented. We don't have a lawyer for the inquest because that's, you could be talking £5,000 a day for a lawyer, and we can't afford it. We are unrepresented, but we are competent, and that is what everybody's finding difficult with us. Hence the obstinance and the nastiness and the unlawfulness with them all. We're just little old us carrying on fighting. And what I would like is if West Streeting would speak to us. I want to know why he's running a health service that takes people's loved ones from them without asking, and without any accountability, and without any justification, and without any justice. And I don't want anybody else's mum to go into hospital and be medically fit for discharge and not come out again. I got told the day after my mum passed away, I rang the secretary of the CEO because I'd been ringing her because they stopped me going in the last couple of days before she did pass away, before we got back in. As they're saying it was down to COVID, it wasn't. It was to keep me out of the hospital because I knew what was going on. And I rang her and said, I need to go and see my mum. And I rang her the day after my mum passed away and I said, do you remember me asking to come in and see my mum when you wouldn't let me come in? And she said, yeah, your mother is medically fit for discharge. There's nothing wrong with her. She didn't have a fractured sternum. So I said a name. I said, actually, my mum passed away yesterday. And she just went silent and I put the phone down. And that's what we was dealing with. Not to mention the inconsistencies and stuff, rubbish that they've come out with. The hospital referred to my mum by a different name in the reports. The coroner's referred to my mum as a man in the original interim death certificate. She was a man. She was a widower. She was divorced, which isn't true. My mum was married for 60 years to my dad when my dad passed away. All of these little things add up and hurt you. They all add to the pain. We've had instances where they've said she passed away 2 weeks later than what she did. The incompetence is like a disease that runs through all of them. And I refer to them as a cult, the lot of them as a cult, because that is what they come across as. And their incompetence is shocking, unbelievable. And the way they treat the deceased is disgraceful. To get a deceased lady's name wrong, to say she was a man on the interim death certificate, the gender, to say she was widowed, a widower, to say she was divorced. What are these people doing? Haven't we gone through enough? Aren't we going through enough? I miss my mum every single day, of every minute of every single day. I still text her phone and the messages still go through. I didn't get to say goodbye to my mum. She died in a poky, filthy little room in Castle Hill Hospital in Cottingham, Hull, where the curtains were hanging off the window. There was blood on the floor. That was where my mum ended her life, and she deserved so much better than that. And I'll say now, until I'm no longer breathing, I will fight for justice for my mum. I don't go to these people and say, tell me how she died. I go to these people and say, I know how she died. You tell me why it happened. And that is what they don't like. Because otherwise, if you go asking the questions, they can fill you in with any rubbish that suits them. So, we are fully prepared. We know exactly what happened. And I don't let up on them 1 inch. Absolutely not. Because my mum deserved better than that. And in death, she deserves justice, and she deserves to rest in peace. It's like at one of the I just say, Andy, to one of the meetings we went to with the ICB, and somebody might learn a little bit from us if they're going through the same. Don't accept the rubbish they come out with. Don't ask them for answers. You tell them what you know. We went into one said meeting where there was supposed to be reading out the results of their serious incident investigation that was flawed and paused by Dame Ruth May. I took photographs of my mum in frames. My mum, just a couple of months before she passed away, happy as Larry, fit as you like in the garden centre. And I put them all out on the table in front. Well, did they squirm? Them managers on 200-300 grand a year, did they squirm? What have you done that for? I said, well, this is who we're all discussing. You might as well see what she looks like. It made them really uncomfortable. And that is the sort of thing people need to be doing. Remind them exactly that she was a person. She's somebody's mother. She was somebody's wife. She was herself. And none of them had the right to do what they did to her. Accidents happen, we accept that. If they weren't trained to use the equipment, then we would have accepted an accident happened. If they'd have got her off the floor and CT scanned her immediately, they would have treated her and she would have lived, and she wouldn't have had the infusion because that wouldn't have happened. Just admit what you've done. Don't leave elderly people in situations like that to rot and die in front of you. The worst thing is these nurses were walking past her every single minute of those days. They were walking past her and ignoring her, and it is shocking. Absolutely shocking. And I don't want anybody to go through what she went through firstly and what we're going through now, because it's finished my life off. I'll never be happy again. Never, ever. I would rather she would, she'd have died her own natural death, whatever it was going to be, not at the hands of the very people paid to care and look after her, and then go on to cover it up just to save their own scrawny necks. So I'm here fighting to the end, Andy. It's not the end for me yet.
Well, now I've met you, I mean, like I said, any help I can give or suggest, I never do anything without people's permission, because there's no point doing a radio show if you're gonna go against people, So yeah, I'm always here for good causes, and I mean, I secretly do like the officials to admit what they've done wrong, and usually that works good, because they admit what they've done wrong. You get peace and happiness. Everyone's happy. It's when they do the cover-ups, which isn't what we want.
No, I mean, cover-ups are happening every single day. It's part of the course now. It's the way this country works. And what starts as a cover-up becomes a scandal. And I think what's happened to my mother and what's happened thereafter is the biggest scandal in this area. You wouldn't believe the amount of money the NHS and the ICB and the police have slung at lawyers to defend themselves. We've had 3 pre-inquest hearings so far, and the courtroom's full of lawyers. Not ours, because we can't afford. The bereaved family just left to fend for themselves in the coronial court as well. And that's another fault of the system. We're picked on in the coronial court because we're unrepresented. Yet the lawyers to the trust and the ICB and the police, they're treated like little tin gods. What they say goes. And the bereaved family are just left. In fact, our last pre-inquest hearing explained this to me. The coroner had uniformed police sat in at the back. Why? I don't know.
Wow.
Why? No idea. And I asked him, I said, can you tell me why there's uniformed police sat at the back? And he said, oh, for the protection of everybody in the court. I said, who? You or us? And obviously they said them. So I said, well, none of my mother's family are criminals. We've never been convicted. You know, we're all law-abiding citizens. I'll ask you again, why are uniformed police sat at the back of the courtroom? And he said, officers, stand up and leave the court. So they're
Yeah,
employed.
Because I mean, I'm just thinking that they're probably not even calling you criminals. Maybe what's going to happen is you're going to get upset and start talking the truth and disrupting the meeting. But you wouldn't have police there. I mean, a social worker, maybe, even what you call it, a priest. But you certainly wouldn't have the police there, would you?
Well, they did. 2 uniformed police officers sat at the back. Happy as Larry, sat there getting paid for just being sat in a comfy chair all day when there's crime happening on the streets. They could be better employed elsewhere. I'd rather they be employed helping little old ladies cross the road safely than sat in the back of my, you know, pre-inquest hearing about my mum, making people feel uncomfortable. That is the lengths they go to further to tell themselves that they are right. You know, we are right because we've had to get the police in to sit in on this family. We are right because we're accusing the family of having ulterior motives. What ulterior motives? They're an absolute joke. Which to me proves that they're all terrified of the truth coming out because they're making up so many lies, allegedly, I'll say again, because I'm not having them come after me, just to further their story that nothing happened. And by goodness, they've changed their story so many times. You could write a book on how many times they've changed their story. The families has never changed and it never will change because it's the truth. And it's actually what happened with no need to change it. You know, I've got phone records, I've recorded calls, we've recorded Teams meetings that they didn't know about. And then obviously we got what are you doing that for, recording? Well, I was recording in my own home, and it's for the benefit of the greater public. So you know,
that's the word. That's the word. It's for the benefit of justice and the greater public
of course
because
it is.
you're allowed to do that.
And
And
what happens in that?
you don't even have to tell them you're recording, even in public, as long as there's a reason, a good one.
It was in my own home. We're not tech savvy. We're getting on a bit. We're not young. You know, you could even say we pressed the wrong buttons on the laptop. I didn't even know how to send an email until my mum passed away.
Or hard of hearing.
Yeah. Fortunately, our teams recorded meetings with the Integrated Care Board, who were the investigators of the serious incident, captured some corkers of lies, allegedly, and they also captured one of the investigators having a full-blown meltdown on my husband.
Wow.
Raging at him, she was. By goodness, you should have seen her face when I told her it was recorded. That was worth its weight in gold. It really was. So yeah, if you can't beat them, join them. It's for the benefit of the public. If I can stop one other elderly person being treated like my mum was treated and losing their life, then my mum would be proud of me. And that's why I've got to continue. We don't break the law. We won't break the law. We're not a criminal family. I don't need to break the law to get my truth out there. But we all know the way this country's going, and you can't speak the truth. You'll get locked up for telling the truth.
And you shouldn't be ashamed
It
of
shouldn't be like
telling the
that.
truth.
I'm not ashamed. I know what they did to my mum. I'm not ashamed of it, but I am also aware of what these people are capable of. But I feel so strongly about what happened to my mum that I don't want it to happen to anybody else. I don't want anybody else to suffer like she did. You know, I see little old ladies in the supermarket. I used to take her around the supermarket regularly. And it breaks my heart when I see them with their middle-aged or, getting on a bit daughters. And I stand there and I think, That was me with my mum. I hope your mum don't go through what my mum did. And it's feasible because the incompetence is there. And the crack on it's to do with funding. It's not to do with funding. The hospitals are funded adequately. It's how they spend that funding. It's how the funding's distributed. And a lot of it goes in the manager's pockets.
I was just going to say that.
Absolutely. The
But
people that
it's
we've
true.
met on, upwards of 100, 200 grand for sitting there making stories up, allegedly, and covering up death. That's where the money goes. It don't go where it's supposed to go. It's just shocking. And I made a promise to my mum on that day, like I wrote, and I will see it through. I will still be asking questions, writing letters, calling out what seems to be we're calling out the coroner now, until either somebody like West Streeting finds out. Dinah Johnson wasn't interested. Shame on her. The Labour councillor from my area, shame on her. But never mind. I don't need Dinah Johnson. I can speak for myself. We've just got it. I would love to be able to get this information to West Streeting and him do something about it. Just to be believed.
I can't promise miracles.
I know.
But I think God will help in some way. Whoever our God is, you may have a different God to mine, but I'm pretty certain he's got ways.
Well, who knows, yeah. You never know, a whistleblower might come forward when it gets to inquest, because at the minute, the inquest is scheduled for after Christmas. We've had the pre-hearing inquest. We've had 3 of those, and they've been quite traumatic. But the lawyers for the said organisations are currently fighting not to have certain people there. Obviously, the people that are culpable. Surprise, surprise. So that's going to be interesting. So anybody who's interested in, what's gone on, more than welcome to come and sit at the inquest. I do believe it's open to the public. The last 3 have been pretty interesting in the fact that the family are not concerned one iota at calling out the coroner. So much so that the first one recused himself. I just stood up. I said, I've got zero faith in you, because of his instruction letters to the experts were, in my opinion, allegedly preloaded. Very, very concerning. So we fear nobody. We don't fear titles. We don't fear position. Nobody's better than anybody else. If you're there and you're paid to do a job, then do your job properly. That's all I ask. I don't care if you're called sir. I don't care if you're a professor. I don't care if you sit up higher than us in the coroner's court and tell us that whatever you say goes, and if you want to shoot us down, you will do. Tell us to be quiet when you hold your hand up. I don't care. You're a human being the same as I am, and if you respect me, I'll respect you back. If you don't, then you don't get the respect back, as far as I'm concerned. And we've seen that all the way through. Shocking.
Because if you're fair and you want the truth, you'll be a good person. It doesn't matter what you look like, what your title is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the truth, isn't it? At the end of the day, we're fighting for the truth.
Don't wash with us. It doesn't wash with me. I don't care that he calls himself professor. I don't care that he comes in and says his word goes. Just, treat us with respect, and, we'll all have a mutual respect for each other. And we've not seen any respect at all. We've been treated disgracefully. You'd think it was a criminal court, the way that the coronial process is going at the minute.
And it's shocking that not one person, even if it wasn't official in a letter or an email, they didn't actually personally say, look, I'm very sorry what happened, blah, blah, blah. But that would have helped.
No, we've had no medical underwriting in the complaint response. There was no medical underwriting in it. The complaint response from the trust wasn't even signed by anybody. So it could have come from the guy who, empties the bins, because it wasn't signed by anybody. The lack of process employed towards my family in the investigations and the responses, again, has been shocking. They just make the rules up as they go along. No medical underwriting, no signing, nothing. There's
CEO left.
there's been blood tests written into the medical records that weren't there before by hand. There's been records omitted, records not rectified. You name it, it's happened to us. Everything. You couldn't write what's happened to us.
What makes me laugh a little bit as well, which kind of isn't funny, but your local MP or your local councillor, Diana Johnson, she was recently, in previous jobs, Minister for State of Crime. You would have thought at least she would have listened.
She was the police crime commissioner. She did a Teams meeting with us and her face didn't crack. There wasn't an ounce of sympathy, empathy, nothing.
Wow.
She said she'd have a meeting with somebody from the ICB. She didn't help us at all, not one little bit. She could have cracked the police for us. She could have come down heavy on the police and said, stop leading this family up the garden path. Nothing. Absolutely. She said she couldn't get involved. So, she's lost my respect. Utterly and completely. Maybe we'll go to her opposition and see if they're interested in the story. No, it's all these, like I said, all these people that appeared in a position of prominence, or they're elected into a position to help people such as us, to give us a platform to get justice. Not one of them's helped us. Nobody. And it's not because we're not telling the truth, and it's not because it didn't happen. It's because the fear that it is so damning, the truth is so bad. They don't want to admit it and they don't want to get involved. They're scared. They're all running scared. The BBC aren't interested. Again, they wouldn't touch us with a barge pole. They're more interested in how many telegraph poles are going up in a certain area. They don't spout the news.
That's quite funny, because I know a guy that lives near Hull, and he's saying that on these telegraph poles, they're putting all these 5G things on them. But anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, nobody's really interested in human interest stories where people are dying, and people are dying every single day.
Absolutely, it's shocking.
Certain news outlets will touch certain things, like somebody got fed the wrong food in hospital. They got sweet corn instead of peas. They won't touch on somebody who was killed, like my mother, and all the shocking happenings around it. It's the way it's going. It's like that for a lot of people.
No, absolutely. Look, we've had a good hour, and I think your story is amazing, and I'll do everything in my power. I do know a few people in media, whether they listen or not, and I know a few people in Parliament. Again, it only needs one person to say, look, we'll look into it, and I can try, but can't promise nothing. But if I close the show now, after your last words,
Yeah.
and then have a quick chat with you to see if I can help in other ways, because there are more ways than the official channel.
That sounds good.
Remember, we're fairing people. We're truth and honest. We
Yeah,
don't do
yeah.
anything wrong. We only
No,
bring
no,
the
no.
truth
Yeah,
based on the evidence we have between us.
absolutely. We don't need to do anything wrong if you've got the truth, do you? And like I keep saying to everybody, we are not criminals. We just know the truth, and that's it. That's all we know is the truth.
And the truth will set you free.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I hope the truth doesn't give other families the pain that we've got.
And the last thing I'll say is rest in peace, Joan. You've
Thank
got a
you.
lovely daughter and family, and she will do what she says.
Yeah, thank you. There's not just me, there's a lot of us. She's got 6 kids, my mum. And we're all fighting for her. She was a good mum. She was a good person. She was a hard worker. And she would have given every individual who's failed her last penny, you know, on the street. She would have helped any one of them, and they treated her like they did. Shocking.
And when the NHS does or do listen, we don't know which, the police, the coroner, anything, just do your job. Be a human being, be honest, do it properly and help this family.
Well, yeah, it's like you say, until it happens to them, it's not happening. When things go wrong for their families with an organisation or whatever, they'd be shouting from the rooftops. You know, one of the police officers who I spoke to earlier on this year, he said to me, he said, "I really admire you." I said, "I don't want you to admire me. I want you to do the right thing and investigate my mum's death and give it a crime number and pull in the people responsible and interview them properly." And he said, "You've got balls. You've got the biggest balls I've ever met." I said, "I don't want to hear that. I just want you to do your job properly." So they think they're giving you something by giving you what they perceive as a compliment, but it's not. I just want you to do your job properly. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he
If
knows who he
anybody
is.
wants to comment on the show, Freedom Talk Radio 2013 at gmail.com. Just going to play a quick jingle.
The world of truth and transparency with 2 Ps in a podcast with global guests and dynamic discussions. Explore the topics mainstream media won't cover. Join Andy Peacher from Scotland and author Timothy Spearman from Canada, and be part of the conversation. Email us to be our guest. Freedom Talk Radio 2013 at gmail.com. Visit freedomtalkradioonline.com, your gateway to unfiltered conversations and insight.